Welcome one and all. It's time. Clash of Kings 2024 edition has just landed on my doorstep. And I'm going to have a look at it. There it is. Look at that. Impressive bit of bookmanship. The Twigletkin obviously get top billing this year, being the brand new faction. So they get the front cover. There's some spicy artwork of them in here as well. If it doesn't disappear with this weird background thing I've got going on. There you go. A very fancy pants. Or fancy lack of pants in that instance. And the Twiglets, although you might think they're the main event, the main event is actually the Abyssal Dwarves. Because there have been some quite significant changes. The two factions obviously most relevant to me at the moment, Abyssal Dwarves and Night Stalkers. Night Stalkers got some pretty significant love in the last Clash of Kings, obviously, with some brand new units. So, not expecting much for them in this one. However, Abyssal Dwarves, the words making the rounds are that certain Abyssal Dwarf units, which I have recently added more of to my collection, are getting a bit of a boost. And in some cases, I'm going to say that's a bit of an understatement. So as I'm flicking through the book here, I'm going to go straight past the Twigletkin for the moment. And by the way, if anyone's wondering where I got this book from, I ordered it from Firestorm Games. So they were very quick on the draw there. And I'm sure other people have got their Clash of Kings in hand as we speak. So let's have a look at the Abyssal Dwarves. So, in fact, before we do that, there's a couple of just general overall changes that affect all the different factions regardless. So, Titans becoming unit strength 2. I don't think that's really news to anybody. I think we were all anticipating that. And it's a nice change. So, for example, your dragon isn't now going to be held out of an area or tying an area because an ogre hero decides to dip a toe into that area as well. The dragon is considered more significant than an ogre now, which is nice. The potshot special rule has been removed. Now, which units actually have the potshot ability? Someone let me know in the chat which units is that affecting specifically, because I certainly haven't been using any units that have the potshot ability. And is that mostly a canon thing? Let's see. We've got Bart and Colin in the chat. So yes, potshot is gone. And there are a few extra special rules as well, some of which are relevant to the Abyssal Dwarves. Colin says crossbows and rifles have the potshot ability. Okay, well, not anymore. So, specific rules here. Redeploy, which is exactly how it would sound. So at the end of deployment, you can just set up a unit again, which is a nice rule. And we're not going to be going through this whole book, by the way. We're mostly going to be focusing on the Abyssal Dwarves, because obviously, very exciting for me. One rule that is definitely relevant to the Abyssal Dwarves is ordered march, which is, I'd seen this floating around as well. It's not the first I've heard of this one. So when issuing an at the double order, the unit can make a single pivot, basically. So they kind of become nimble while making at the double moves, which sounds good to me. And a lot of the Abyssal Dwarf infantry seem to have gained that rule, which is nice because just moving along at 4 inches a turn, and unless you're going in a perfect straight line, that's the limit of it basically. But now you can actually do a bit of a pivot while going at the double if you have that rule. So hopefully the regular dwarves have got that as well, because they're also painfully slow. And another one that I've seen similar things floating around, secured position. So war machines can now score with a unit strength of 0. Now, I'm going to assume that means they hold an area as long as no enemy unit strength is in there. If that is incorrect, feel free to let me know. But that would say to me that since it's 0, if you have 1 war machine in an area and the enemy has 4, then neither of you would hold it because you both have a total of 0. Is that right? Or can they not hold areas at all? And can they be used to hold tokens? I don't know. I have to see that clarified by somebody. But if they have a unit strength of 0, can they hold an objective if their unit strength is 0? If there's something I'm missing with that rule, let me know. And several of the other changes in this book are not particularly relevant to the Abyssal Dwarves. Colin says we shall find out on the table. Yes, I'd want to see someone go into more detail on that one. But if that makes war machines more useful, that can't be a bad thing because they haven't seen much action. Especially mine lately. Not since the days of running the 4 goblin rock throwers, which was the golden era of war machines. So, Abyssal Dwarves. What isn't going to change for the Abyssal Dwarves? I would say golems. No need to change them. They're fine as they are. They're very good. You can make a nice solid list out of them. Things that you can't make a nice solid list out of, half-breeds. I really like the models. That's why I've got 2 regiments of them, but they're not very good. So I assume they're going to get some changes. I would also like to see the big flyers get some changes, either come down in points or get some more rules. Those are the 2 main things that I'm going into this anticipating. Also decimators. I don't particularly rate them, and I would like them to get a bit of a boost as well, either dropping points or some extra juice. So let's see who's had their juice squeezed out, shall we? Berserkers, first of all, which is a unit I don't have. And as with all the infantry that are mentioned here, do gain the ordered march special rule, so they get to do that pivot while moving at the double, which is very nice. They also, their slaver nets have been amended so that they are ensnaring now. And what did they do before? Ensnare infantry and heavy infantry only, whereas it's just general ensnare now. So they ensnare everybody instead of just those specific units, which is nice. Nice change for Berserkers. That's the only significant change they're getting. Points are still the same. Black Souls. Let's see. So you can... Let's have a look. They look the same. They've gained the ordered march, obviously. And amend Fiery Bulwark. Gain the Iron Resolve D3 for 10 points. Okay, so that's just a rewording of that rule, I think, because they have clarified some things on Iron Resolve in here, so that you can have a specific number of Iron Resolve now. So that makes sense that they would clarify that and reword it a bit. Okay, Decimators. So one of the units that I wanted to see get some changes. Their weapons have gone up to 14 inches from 12 inches. No other changes, just a slight range upgrade, which is great because they're very slow. And let's see, what specific matchups is that going to affect, having a 14-inch range? So they now have an 18-inch threat range. So certain units that previously could have sat at a safe distance from them, while also being in position to charge them, now can't quite so readily. So that's good. Just overall, you can just cover a bit more ground with them, with their threat range. So that's pretty good. That's their biggest downside probably, was the tiny range, considering they're so slow. So a little bit of a boost. I can understand not making wholesale changes to units, but then, saying that, some of the other units coming up in a minute. But Decimators, I can understand just giving them that little tweak, see if that pushes them into more use. I don't think they're horrendously bad. I think they're just lacking something, and maybe 2 inches is what they were lacking, so we'll find out. So I've actually got a full horde of them although I've got them based on troop bases, so I can run them in different sizes. And I've also got some of the new ones as well, which I haven't painted yet. So, on to Immortal Guard. So, all the infantry ordered march again. You can also upgrade the Immortal Guard now to give them Crushing Strength 1. Which is nice, because you're not paying that much for it, actually. So you're paying 10 or 15 points. So let's have a look. So 15 points on the regiment. That would put them up to 175 points, because they haven't had a points adjustment. But they would gain Crushing Strength 1, which is quite significant, actually. Because that's the one downside to the Immortal Guard, is the fact that they don't hit that hard. But they've got Vicious, and they hit on 3s. The one thing missing was that little bit of Crushing Strength option. And important to note, it's not an option to trade in their defense for Crushing Strength, which a lot of units get. It's just on top of their excellent defensive capabilities. So, Immortal Guard, definitely. Infantry are looking like they're back on the menu based on this. Now, okay, we're about to get to the juicy stuff now. So, Abyssal Half-Breeds. I've got the Kings of War army list builder page up here so I can compare, make sure I'm getting all the changes correct. So let's pull up the Half-Breeds. Right, what lets them down? Not very good nerve, low defense, and they're quite expensive for that. Because they hit hard, obviously. They don't have that many attacks, but hitting on 3s with Vicious is always pretty good. So, let's see what they've given to them. Half-Breeds have had their nerve amended. So, the troop has gone up to 12-14, so that's gone up by 1. And the regiment has gone up to 15-17, so they've both gained a point of nerve. And they've had their points changed slightly, so the regiment has come down a teensy bit. It's just had 5 points shaved off. So they've pretty much gained a point of nerve and a tiny points reduction. That's fine. I'm quite happy with that, because they've already got quite a lot of good special rules. They've already got Crushing Strength, Thunderous Charge, Fury, Regeneration, and Vicious. So I don't think they really needed to add much to them other than that nerve. And a little bit of point shave off as well. Very nice. So they're way more likely, just with that 1 point of nerve, I think that makes them a lot more likely to survive and actually be able to use, for example, their Fury, which they often didn't because they were dead. So more chance of being alive now. And let's move on to... Okay, this is maybe one of the wildest changes in here. The Grotesques. I didn't think they would tinker with them too much. I thought they were already pretty good. But apparently not. So, what was letting down the Grotesques for people? Because I've been using them for a long time. But I haven't seen that many of them on the table, to be fair, so maybe there's a reason for that. What's wrong with them, looking at their stats then? Well, what issues would you have with Grotesques? Only hitting on 4s can obviously be a bit of an issue sometimes. And they're quite reliant on that Crushing Strength, because they've got Thunderous Charge 2 and Crush 1. So, obviously, you don't want to be making lots of hindered charges with them, because you'll be hitting on 5s then, and you're going to lose some of that juicy Thunderous as well. What have they done with Grotesques then? I'm going to tell you immediately that they've actually made them more expensive. They've added 5 points onto them, but what do you get for those 5 points? Fury. Well, that would be okay. And Strider. Fury and Strider for 5 points. I was using them anyway, so sounds good to me. So what does that do for them then? Well, Abyssal Grotesques. They are definitely a unit that gets wavered, because they've got quite a high nerve, but I have run into them getting wavered a fair bit over the years. So Fury, very nice. They don't often get wavered from shooting compared to combat, because they've got good defense and high nerve, so it is usually going to be a nice combat unit that wavers them. So, nice to have that. Strider. I didn't see them adding that, but apparently Grotesques now have Strider. And that is something that I would usually pay for the upgrade to let them use that once per game. So my unit of Grotesques have actually come down by about 20 points because I usually gave them that upgrade anyway. So I'm going to be able to give them a different upgrade now. And Fury and Strider, what kind of upgrades would you now put on Grotesques? Would you consider now maybe... I suppose +1 to hit is a bit expensive on them since they are a horde at the higher point level. That might be better off for the half-breeds because obviously the highest you can go with them is a regiment. So you're not paying as much for it in a regiment as you are a horde. But, that's going to be interesting because I've got 2 hordes of Grotesques, so suddenly they've got a lot better. And one of the issues with Abyssal Dwarfs is that you didn't really have anything apart from the Greater Obsidian Golem, and I think the Hellfane as well. Only those 2 big beasties that had any kind of Strider abilities, no Pathfinder and Strider on those 2, but nothing else. So if you're not running them, you would struggle with terrain. A lot of things hitting on 4s, Golems and Grotesques, and lots of difficult terrain around at the moment. So, Strider, suddenly Grotesques look very tasty. I thought they were pretty tasty anyway, but apparently they weren't tasty enough for some people, so they've added some extra spice to them. Now, I'm actually going to skip ahead here and go back in a minute, but I'm going to go to the 2 champions for these 2 units now. So, the half-breed champion. They've made a change here. Now, what was always weird about the half-breed champion was that he did not have Fury when I'm looking right here, and regular half-breeds do have it. The champion did not. That was a very strange situation that he found himself in. So he's gained Fury, and that's the only change. He was already quite a good unit, but now he's got Fury. And the kind of thing you're going to be attacking with a half-breed champion are quite likely to waver you if they get to hit you back. So you're actually going to get some benefit from that. Mine's been wavered plenty of times. So that's nice. He didn't need a boost really. That just brings him in line with the rest of the army, which is nice. However, the Grotesque champion has completely changed. Because the Grotesque champion used to be really a worse version of the half-breed champion because not being individual, so you couldn't just charge off in any direction, and most of its other rules were the same. I suppose it did have a bit of extra thunderous charge and brutal, but it lacked inspiring, and it's slower, and it's not an individual, so you lose benefits from that. But obviously it scores, and if you get flanks, so there were some pluses, but overall it wasn't as widely seen as the half-breed champion. It was 140 points. How many points is it now? The Grotesque champion is now 220 points. What? You might be thinking. What could they possibly have done to the rules to warrant that massive points increase? Well, the Grotesque champion has gone up from 5 attacks to 7. Its nerve has gone up by 3 whole points. It's now 15-17. And, okay, it's gained 3 special rules. So here are the special rules it already has. Brutal, Crushing Strength 2, Nimble, Regeneration 5+, Thunderous Charge 1, Vicious, Melee. It's had 3 special rules added to it. It now has Fury, Inspiring, and Strider. So that thing is quite a little death machine now. And it's not particularly easy to crack either. So it's only 1 nerve lower than the actual Grotesque Horde, with the same defense, and obviously a smaller frontage so you can have less things attacking it. You're paying the price for it though, 220 points, so it is expensive now. But Bart says Mini Dragon, yeah. That is basically what it is. I compare its stat line to, let's see, what rocks in with 7 attacks? Does a vampire on a Pegasus have 7 attacks still? I'm sure it used to. So it's that kind of unit. It's now falling into that bracket. because it was really occupying the space that no one wanted filled before, and now it's actually got a purpose, I would say. Obviously, I don't know whether the point level feels right for it yet. I have to try it out on the table. But just on paper here, with all those special rules, with Brutal that it already had, Fury, Inspiring, Strider, that's quite a significant creature you've got there. And with the Strider, and that Thunderous Charge 1 is then most of the time going to come into play. And very, very solid choice. So I'm glad I've got a Grotesque champion, because I would definitely like to try that out in its new variation. Of course, the points have gone up, so running identical lists to before, they'd have to be tweaked slightly to fit him in there. Okay, so the two champions have had little boosts to bring them in line with the new profiles of the units, and the Grotesque champion has been completely redesigned. Let's see. We've got Dwarven Darkness still commenting away in there. Okay, who's next? So the War Machines pretty much gained the secured position rule, which is the rule we talked about where they're a scoring unit with unit strength of 0. And the Dragonfire team actually has moved its speed up a bit, and it's gone to defense 5. Yeah, the Dragonfire team is actually something I'd forgotten existed because I just haven't used them. I do have one unpainted. So yeah, it did used to be defense 4, speed 4, range 12. So yeah, it was very difficult to actually get use out of it. You compare it to the Goblin War Trombone and it just did not stack up at all because it doesn't have the piercing. It's only got vicious and it's slower. And yeah, so it's gained some defense, it's gone up to speed 5, and the range of its gun, like all the Abyssal Dwarf guns, has gone up to 14. So, Dragonfire team, I might have to actually paint one now. Anyone who's followed my channel for a while will know that I'm a big fan of the old Goblin War Trombone, triple War Trombone attack, backing up the main line. So, Dragonfire team could be back on the menu. Let's see. The various Titans have obviously had their unit strength increased to 2 across the board, which is nice. So your likes of Great Obsidian Golem, Hellfane, and the big flappy heroes as well, who I'll get to because they've had some significant changes as well. So, the Overmaster has amended the Infernal Advance rule. Let's have a look. Overmaster. Infernal Advance used to be gain aura Strider, infantry only, cannot be taken in addition to magical artifacts. It now says gain aura Strider, infantry only. So you now can take that in addition to magical artifacts by my reading, which is nice. I didn't see a lot of Overmasters on foot, probably because you didn't really see a lot of infantry. You may well do now, because they've had some significant upgrades here. There used to be only really one, in my opinion, one competitive way to build an Abyssal Dwarf list. I know in the past people did have success with Grotesques and Gargoyle heavy lists, but in general it's been mainly about the Golems for quite a while now. So you can actually do infantry lists or abomination lists and have something solid to put out now. Let's have a look. The Hexcaster. So the Hexcaster has removed the ability that it had where you would only hit it on a 6 with spells, and instead it's just gained Spell Ward instead. So not only will it protect itself, who will now be slightly easier to hit with spells, but it also will protect nearby units. Very nice. Now, that would combo quite nicely with the Golems, because the Hexcaster is a good one to run with Golems if you're going to be casting weakness on the enemy, making it really difficult to wound them, and Spell Ward on there as well, going to make it difficult to get some of those spells off, like your Drain Life, for example, which is always annoying to face. Infernox, who is the little... well, he's not that little, I suppose. He is... let me pull up his profile here. So he's the large infantry model. There is a new model, but I use the old Arhack Soulbinder model as mine. with his soul vacuum. So what's he had? He has got a ranged attack now, 12-inch range, 3 attacks. So it kind of just brings him into line, I think, with the dwarf juggernaut. It's the juggernaut, isn't it? The equivalent sized dwarf unit. So it gains a bit of a shooting attack there. And can also pay for the aura elite melee infantry only. So, not bad. Then we've got the Overmaster on Ancient Winged Strider Half-Breed, it's called now. Interesting. So, amend unit strength 2, yep. Add the Fury special rule. That's what we like to see. So lots of Fury being dished out to the Abyssal Dwarves here. And that's the only thing that the regular one has. So I used to run this guy sometimes. I always just thought he was too expensive. But with the extra unit strength all Titans are getting and Fury added, will that convince me to run it more? Maybe. It does get wavered. Then the Supreme Ironcaster on Great Winged Half-Breed. Now this one has never really been visible anywhere, as far as I've seen in the competitive scene. I've not seen anyone run this one, ever. So, let's just pull up this one. Supreme Ironcaster. So this one used to be 270 points, which is 300 points. The other one is 300 points, so he was 30 points lower. But then obviously you'd have to pay if you wanted to take any spells that weren't Fireball. And really, it's because it only hit on 4s and it has less attacks, and I think it's got slightly lower nerve as well. Let me just check. Yeah, teensy bit lower nerve. And all those things combined just meant, why would you really want to take this one? I was actually thinking of running this guy with the Diadem, so he'd be on Fireball 18. But let's have a look at the changes now that have come in. So the unit strength obviously gone up. Points have dropped by 20. He's gained Fury. And the one rule I thought Abyssal Dwarves would never have. Radiance of Life. Radiance of Life in an army that can take Defense 6 golems. I'm not going to argue with that one bit. However, for this price, it does remove Fireball, and you then have to pay to get Fireball back. So, you can really put him back to his original points cost by paying for the Fireball. But you can also obviously get other spells, the likes of Lightning Bolt, Surge, and Heal. And yeah, this is pretty spicy so far. He's also got some unique rules. So, once per turn, after successfully casting Fireballs, obviously you have to have purchased Fireball, the Supreme Ironcaster may then cast Banechant, Heal, or Surge on a friendly unit within 12 inches of this model, regardless of arc or line of sight. So, you don't even have to be looking at the unit that you cast this next bit on. So, you keep this guy behind the golems, Radiance of Life on them, shoot the Fireball over them, and then immediately after doing that, you can then Banechant, Heal, or Surge on the golems as well. So this is kind of... I wasn't thinking they were going to do this, because he kind of dropped off my radar a little bit, this guy, because he was just so bad as a non-alternative. But he is actually an alternative to the other flyer now. He's not fighty, but he kind of struggled because you were paying for the theoretical occasional time where he might actually be able to get in a good fighting situation and do some spells. You were paying a lot of points for that possibility that might never come up though. Whereas now he looks like a viable alternative to the Overmaster. Then he's also got an option. So for each, if you can pay for this by the looks of it, For each friendly Abyssal Half-Breed or Abyssal Grotesque unit within 6 inches, increase the amount of dice rolled with Bane Chant, Heal, Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Mind Fog, and Surge, up to a maximum of +3. And you're only paying 10 points for that upgrade, so if you're running a list that contains a lot of those things... Yeah, because this was such a terrible unit before, a big spellcaster on the back of a big monster. It was expensive and didn't really do either thing particularly well. It actually feels good now. Actually feels like it can contribute and fight for its position in army lists. So that is very interesting. Yeah, the diadem is still going to be an option there to take it up to Fireball 18. Now obviously it's going to get more expensive at that point. How much is the diadem now? Is it 25 or 30 points or something? Let's have a look. Diadem of Dragonkind. Where are you? £30 points. Yeah, so you're getting him up to 300 points by doing that, but at that stage you've got Fireball 18. You can then immediately cast another spell afterwards, which you have to pay for as well. So, let's have a look. Or do you? May choose to cast one of those spells. Bane Chant, Heal, Surge. Because I don't even see access to Bane Chant. Yeah, I don't see Bane Chant on this list of its spells. On the Kings of War army building app. So that is interesting. Yeah, because I'm not seeing an option to pay for Bane Chant either. So I don't know whether he just gets to cast one of those spells without actually paying for them, or whether you have to purchase that spell first. Yeah, because it doesn't say how many Bane Chant, how many Heal, or how many Surge. So presumably the Heal and the Surge would be the ones that you can pay 20 points to purchase. But I don't see Bane Chant on there at all. So, would need to look into that further. Infernock is obviously a Titan, so goes up to unit strength 2. Dravek Dalkin. I think they've just reworded his... Oh no, they've given him the same ability that the regular casters have. So they basically have Vicious on their Fireball, and he's been given the same rule now. And here's another juicy change. Bracky Barker has gained Fury. That is spicy. There's no Basusu upgrades though. Very sad about that. Basusu could have used Vicious to just be in line with the rest of the army. But Fury, Bracky Barker, can't argue with that. Very nice. And there's a formation which is mostly Slave Orc related, and the other formation has been removed, so you can't take the Immortal Guard formation anymore. Which was a way that you could make them a bit fightier in the previous book, but you also had to take Infernox as part of it, whereas now you can just buy Crushing Strength for them. So, very nice all round. Nothing extra for Susan, but I think she's still very useful to have in there. She is facing direct competition from the Grotesque champion now, because they're around about the same point level. So we'll see. That is some very spicy new competition. Everything just looks good now. Infantry lists look spicy, with the Immortal Guard upgrades and the extra range on the Decimators, and all the infantry just being able to move faster now and actually get to the battle. Grotesques and half-breeds and those kind of fast armies significantly improved. And very little in way of points increase. The Grotesque champion is just a totally different unit now. You can't even look at the old profile much, really. It's changed most of its significant stats and added loads of rules. And then the other big winner is the Supreme Ironcaster on Great Winged Halfbreed, I would say. Actually looks viable now, but I do need to find out where it gets Bane Chant from and how many Bane Chant it can have. So it looks good to me. And Bart says Hellfane change. Well, the Hellfane, I think, yeah, it's only had its unit strength changed, which is a little bit disappointing. I would have liked to have seen the Hellfane maybe come down in points a little bit. Although, you could argue that the Hellfane has been boosted by the fact that infantry are better now. So you're more likely to take the infantry, which the Hellfane boosts. Because if we remember, the Hellfane, whose profile I'm opening up here, so you could already give it the Wild Charge aura on infantry. And of course it has the aura of Brutal for Dwarf only. So the fact that infantry are now viable means that the Hellfane has got a boost without its rules changing. So I'm not too disappointed about that. You could also argue that the fact that the Abomination units are much better makes the Abomination Ironcaster Overseer upgrade for the Hellfane better now, giving life leech +1 to Abomination units, because they're way more likely to be alive in the case of the half-breeds, and way more likely to be fighting after taking damage in the case of the Grotesques and the half-breed champion, the Grotesque champion. And let's see, Infernox. So the Infernox upgrade is Aura Elite Melee Infantry only. The Ironmonger Warlord 1, it says. So I think that's, you can only take it on 1 Infernox. Yeah, so overall, how do my lists change? The Golem list, the only real change, okay, actually 2 changes. First of all, the Greater Obsidian Golem has changed with the unit strength, which is nice, because he's a good choice in that particular list. And then the Ironcaster, who you would take with the Golems, has come down in points. And you now have to pay for Fireballs separately. So let's just pull up the Ironcaster here. So the regular Ironcaster has come down significantly in points actually, but you don't get any spells for free. So he's come down nearly half his points. He's come down to 50 points, but loses all his spells, and then you can buy them back. You can buy Fireball, except it's gone up to Fireball 12 now, but you pay 35 points for that. I don't know if I actually talked about this guy yet. And you could also replace the Fireball and remove the option to replace Fireball with Surge, because you just don't start with Fireball anymore, so you can still just buy Surge 8 for 30 points. That's not changed. So yeah, you just have to buy your spells now. So if you're running him with Surge, he has come down slightly more. And if you're running him with Fireball, he's come down a little bit and gained a couple of Fireball as well. So it's a slight improvement for the Ironcaster, who you would be taking with the Golems, of course. What else would you be taking with the Golems? In a specifically Golem-heavy list, even on my 3 Hordes and 1 Greater Golem list, I usually manage to fit in some Grotesques as well, so them being significantly boosted for only a tiny points increase is quite a big deal. Gaining those 2 special rules, Fury and Strider, very significant. The Half-Breed Champion and Brachybarker are usually competing for spots in that Golem list as well to provide a bit of speed and maneuverability, so they've both been improved with Fury. And if you want to take Dravik Dalkin, let me just open up Mr. Dravik Dalkin here. So he's still quite expensive, but he does now get the vicious on the fireball, like the other Ironcasters. So the main thing with him is because you would take him with Infernock, and then you can still do the cast spells from Infernock, which I don't think I've ever really used. I just haven't seen a great appeal to that. But what would be a good complement to the Golem list now? Suddenly, the Supreme Ironcaster on Great Winged Halfbreed actually sounds really good in a Golem list with Radiance of Life. Obviously, you don't have to pay for the upgrade to get the extra spell dice for the Halfbreeds and Grotesques if it's a mainly Golem list, so keeping his points down. But you can still then cast Heal as well as Fireball in the same turn, while Radiance of Lifing all your Golems. So, sounds good. Sounds very nice indeed. If we're talking infantry lists now, everything's got faster, all the infantry. Their speed hasn't actually gone up, but you can now do a pivot while moving at the double, which effectively doubles their movement, because unless you were moving forward in a direct straight line every turn, then you were never moving your full anyway. So now you actually can do that. So it's very handy for, especially on a terrain heavy board where you need to manoeuvre around terrain or manoeuvre around other units. Very handy for getting across the table a bit. And then the extra range on the shooting of the decimators, very nice as well. So they are viable, and not just viable on their own, obviously a complement to other lists as well. And the cavalry fast lists, I like the sound of it a lot now. Half-breeds with their extra nerve and tiny little points shave, and the Grotesques a tiny little points increase, but Fury and Strider added for that, and then their champions, Grotesque champion completely redesigned, so it's a totally different unit type now. As it should be, I think. Just looking at the model, it should never have been as easy to kill as a half-breed champion, just looking at the two of them next to each other. The Grotesque champion is an absolute beast. So I'm glad that that is significantly redesigned now. We'll see if it's worth its points though, because it is quite pricey to give it a test on the table. Does the change to the Grotesque champion make the likes of Infernox? Does that make him obsolete? Because that's a slot that he would compete for in the list as well. And he's only changed a little bit to gain a shooting attack, so maybe he's got his own role there. Yeah, so that's about it. War Machines obviously might be back on the menu. With the ability to score, maybe, with unit strength of 0. Need to see that fully explained. And Dragonfire team, I'm actually tempted to paint one now. They've got the extra range, got the extra speed, which is going to allow them to keep up with the army, and extra defense. So they're not terrible anymore. I'm going to go out on a limb there and say that Dragonfire team is no longer terrible. It might not be good. We'll have to try it out, but I'm going to confidently say it's not terrible anymore. So, while we're in the book here, I'm just going to have a quick glance to some scenarios at the back. And there's some ambush scenarios in here. I'm not going to go into too much. But I am going to look at some changes. So the push scenario, this has actually been changed. And this is quite a good change, actually. So, a unit may not hold more than one loot counter for purposes of scoring. So, does that mean they can carry more than one, but they'll only score for one? Or does that mean they can't pick up any more? Because those are two very different things. That's quite a big change, though, because no longer will you have all your push tokens just stacked up on one unit marching across the table into the enemy half. Then some missions have been added as well, which I'm not going to go into too much here, but they have added... Actually, if you saw my last tournament report, some of these tournaments, some of these events recently have actually been using some of these scenarios that are in the book here. So there's Hold the Line, and Stockpile, which have been featured in events or in battle reports on this channel before. Let's see, what else do I want to have a quick little look at here? Who else is kind of relevant to my interests? Maybe Undead? Let's see. Is any of this interesting to me? I'm going to pull up the Undead page on here, just a second. This isn't going to be a long video, by the way. Mostly just to talk about the Abyssal Dwarfs, because I think it's very exciting. So, let's have a look. So, some undead stuff has come down in points, I think. So, werewolves have come down in points. Skeleton spearmen have come down in points as well. So, yeah, because you don't see a lot of those, do you? You see a lot of wights and zombies. So, werewolves down, skeleton spearmen down. Skeleton warriors can get crushing strength and lower their defense now, which is cool. Which, wait a minute, they could do that anyway. Ah, but you used to have to pay for that upgrade. Now it's free. Okay. Yeah, so that's nice. That's a good change for the old skeleton warriors. Makes them viable. And in fact, the revenants have had the same treatment. You can actually buy that for them now as well. You can lower their defense and get crushing strength 1 for free, which is an option quite a lot of units do get in this game. Let's have a look at some of the... How much was the Vampire Lord on Undead Dragon? So, that has had a very tiny points decrease. Yeah, any other of my armies of particular interest? I don't think Night Stalkers have really had anything because obviously they got a massive change in the last book. I think most of the Night Stalker changes here are just kind of recapping what the prior book says. Or was it actually in the book, the Night Stalkers, or was it just released separately? Is this the first time they're in the actual book? It could well be. Were they just added to the app, the Night Stalkers? So yeah, this might be the first time the rules are actually in the book. So yeah, they are kind of new to print, if that's the case. But all these rules would already be known. And the unit strengths have changed, obviously. So here's one that's interesting, actually. The Portal of Despair is technically a Titan, so that goes up to unit strength 2. It's a 90 points Titan that's now unit strength 2. So that makes it an even better choice, I would say. And yeah, I think all these were already added to the Night Stalker changes, and those are the ones that are most relevant to me. So, Abyssal Dwarves, very exciting times ahead. And I'm sure other people are going to be diving into this book and specifically picking on the armies that they favour. So let's see, Dwarven Darkness. Thank you, Andy, for putting together this video and covering the updates for the great and spicy Abyssal Dwarves. They are great, they are spicy, they do taste great. Abyssal Dwarves, are they the future? Are they going to dominate the top tables? And as the current #1 ranked Abyssal Dwarf player in the UK, I feel like I had to do this as a public service because I am the authority on that faction, and I've run 2 totally different list archetypes in the last month or 2 for the Abyssal Dwarves. So I was already branching out away from the golems before this book made it much more viable. So don't I feel silly now for running the Grotesques and Half-Breeds with their old crummy rules when I could have just waited for this book to come out and them to become amazing. Okay, let's wrap this one up, shall we? Don't forget to like the video, obviously. Don't forget to subscribe if for some weird reason you haven't. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description, all the various social media shenanigans, and don't forget to pledge all your life savings to me via Patreon or PayPal, obviously, to pay for me to attend 1,000 tournaments a year and report on them again. And yeah, that's pretty much where all my money goes these days. Tournament tickets and travel to those tournaments, although travels tournaments isn't usually that difficult. Being in Nottingham, there are literally dozens of tournaments. Depending on which game system I want to play, there's just lots of them around here. But the tickets are expensive. That is true. So, let me know what you think of the Abyssal Dwarves. Let me know if anything else in the book that you've read has caught your eye, that you would like me to cast my eye over, or anything that's just stood out to you in general. Maybe the Twigletkin, what do you think of them? Now that you've had a look at the book for yourself. And how did your faction do in the Clash of Kings 2024 edition? All that remains to be said now is, good night out there, whatever you are.